Welcome to another Telltale Books video. I'm Greg.
I'm Emily.
And we're here at Blackheart Books in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, recording our videos. We're one night we're doing like a whole month's worth of videos.
We got out of the basement, guys.
Because it's too damn cold in my basement.
Oh, it's real cold outside too. Goodness.
Yes. We've had single digits lately. But this video, we want to get into the next in our Philip K. Dick series, which I think we've kind of let slide for a little while.
Another little dick.
So this is the next Philip K. Dick story, and it's number 34 in my Philip Dick bibliography. It's a short story titled The Hanging Stranger. And this was published... Let me consult my scrolls.
The holy iPad of scrolls.
I gotta put a search on this page.
Okay.
This was published in December of 1953 in Science Fiction Adventures. This is the actual magazine. This cover has nothing to do with the story.
Don't look at that. It's a fun illustration though.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a typical 1950s science fiction story. Yeah. So I'll let you give the synopsis.
All right. So the synopsis is a gentleman whose name escapes me. Can't remember his first name. Ed. Ed is going into work. He owns a business in town, and as he's wandering to work, he sees something weird hanging from one of the lampposts. And so he wanders up to it, and he realizes it's a dead man's body. There's a dead man's body hanging on this lamppost. And he's like, why? And he's like looking at people. He's like, what is happening here? And they're like, oh yeah, it's been there all afternoon. And he's like, and no one's gonna do anything about it? Like, we should call the police. And then everyone's like, why? We figured it's up for a good reason. And he's like, what? So he's just losing his mind because he's like pointing out this body. He's like, what is happening? And everyone's like, what are you talking about? It's just a dead body just hanging there. Everybody's going about their business. So he's losing his absolute mind over this. And eventually he makes such a ruckus that the cops come and pick him up. And while he's in the cop car, he's like, what is going on? And the cops are like, you didn't get the notice? And he's like, what? And he's like, you didn't get the notice? What were you doing this afternoon that you weren't at work? And he's like, I was in my basement doing some remodeling and getting the floor fixed up. Why? And they're like, oh, so you missed the notice. And he's like, oh, okay. I just, I feel better now. And then bails out of the freaking car as quickly as he can because he's like, something is happening here. So he spends the entire evening running from the police, only to discover when he goes to one of the he was going to City Hall, I think it was, trying to see if he could get someone in authority to figure out what the heck's going on. He realizes there are aliens floating in and out of City Hall. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh, crap. They've been mind-controlled by all the aliens or are getting replaced by them. So he's trying to piece this together, and he decides he's got to get the hell out of town. Mm-hmm. So he goes home to his family, tries to convince them to come. They end up being aliens. So he has to kill them and then haul ass out of town. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm going to stop.
Okay.
Because it's kind of a fun little twist at the end for of course, because it's Philip K. Dick. He always has a fun little twist at the end where you're like, oh, man.
Yeah, it relates to why the guy was hanging from the lamppost.
Yeah, so the whole point of the guy hanging on the lamppost is to see who wasn't mind-controlled yet. Or who wasn't replaced. It was a trap, essentially. Mm-hmm. So if you noticed that the guy was on the lamppost and you were alarmed by it, you were still a human. And needed to be either mind-controlled or replaced. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And I thought this was very interesting in conjunction with another story from the 1950s we just read by Philip was a farmer called The Lovers.
Yes.
It relates to that whole mimicry.
Yes.
How insects will use mimicry to lure things in. Mm-hmm. And, even fish will do that. They'll use some mimicry to lure their prey in so that they can eat. And
we also, again, encounter insect-type aliens. Mm-hmm. These are very...
Which is... There's lots of science fiction stories in the 50s that have these insects.
Yeah.
sometimes the insects are okay, other times they're not.
Yeah.
But it was just interesting. We hit these two kind of almost back to back, the hanging stranger and the lovers, that have to do with insects luring people in.
And being.
And that's kind of an answer to your issue with the lovers, is that those aliens do everything through mimicry.
Mm-hmm.
They see something and they mimic it. That's how the whatever biology they have that allows them to do that.
And the lovers, because she had photographic genetic imprint
through photography. Get that genetic imprint.
Yeah,
that's part of whatever it is that allows them to be so advanced at mimicry.
Still didn't like it. It still felt bad and wrong.
It makes sense though.
Who sits there unable to blink during sex though? Ew, yucky. Anyway,
that whole novel was meant to piss off.
Yeah, it pisses a lot of people off. But back to the hanging stranger.
Yeah.
I loved the absurdity of this because it starts out kind of like this really morbid, absurd humor, which is very much up my alley. Mm-hmm. And as I was reading it, I also found an audio version, so I find that reading as well as having someone speak it to me and reading along helps me remember and comprehend stuff a lot better. I was able to find this on Spotify. Oh, I can never remember what the channels are called, but there's a podcast of a gentleman who is a audiobook narrator and reader, and he retired and decided to do audiobook versions of some of his favorite science fiction stuff. So you can find The Hanging Stranger on Spotify being read to you. It was really fun. Very much my humor though. Mm-hmm. Really enjoyed this. Like, I literally paused it, put the book down, laughed my ass off when we got to the first part of it. Mm-hmm. Told everyone in my household what was going on reading this thing, sending the link to this audiobook or this audio version to everybody in the house so that they can enjoy it too, and then went back to reading it because I'm like, we're all gonna love this. It's gonna be great. Mm-hmm. So I had a blast with it. Mm-hmm. It was really fun.
So I feel this is a really excellent example of 1950s paranoia type science fiction.
Yes, I was going to say.
And I also feel it does play into a lot of Philip K. Dick's own themes in his later work of the kind of paranoia that runs through his
having
books.
The replicants, and we people even had that even in some of the stuff we've already read. Like, what was it? Number 2 or something, or there's been a lot of
there've
been a few where this very imposter story.
Figure out if a guy was an android or not.
Yeah, and if it was murderous or not. Mm-hmm. So we kind of see this as a consistent theme with Philip K. Dick, but Dick
never he repeats himself, but he always comes up with such a fresh twist on it. Yeah. That it doesn't feel like he's repeating himself.
No, he uses similar themes, but always to a different outcome or with different circumstances that make it very much its own story, which I've been really enjoying about him. Mm-hmm. He's taking the same thing and making it 18 million different stories somehow.
Yeah.
He's a wizard! So, but that makes it more enjoyable because you're seeing just so many ways that these themes can go, and it just shows you the versatility of having one basic storyline, but the different ways that it can be presented. I think that's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I love that he's taking time to play with it, especially because we're still in 1950.
1953. We haven't got out.
Haven't got out of 1953 yet. Almost, not quite. So this guy's a machine already. I think he's a replicant. He's the alien. Just cranking out these stories. But I really do enjoy that, and especially when you're talking about, we've had all kinds of points in history where this has been a theme. Mm-hmm. The Red Scare, the Cold War, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's really...
now your neighbor might be a terrorist.
Yeah.
There's always that kind of paranoia.
Yeah, there is that paranoia. Or, like, your neighbor might be out to get you for something pettier. Like, they don't like where you placed a tree, so they took it out and hid it somewhere and told you the deer ate it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. So I think it's kind of interesting how he plays up these different themes, but in so many different ways.
Yep.
It's just so well done.
Yep. It is.
Top 2.
Okay, I agree.
Yeah, this is really
He's
good.
got a lot of them, but he's that good.
We've had maybe 2 or 3 that weren't Philip K. Dick, but he's a master, and he's just time and time again proving it to us.
Mm-hmm. And of course, I showed that I have it in Science Fiction Adventures. I've got that original publication. I also have it in Volume 3 of the Complete Stories of Philip K. Dick by Subterranean Press, titled Upon the Dull Earth. This is
beautiful
a
illustration.
very collectible edition of his, well, it's multiple volumes of his short stories. Eventually, if you get all of them, it's all of his stories. There have been many, 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 many other collections and anthologies that have Philip K. Dick stories, like The Hanging Stranger. Not sure which ones have The Hanging Stranger, but there's a lot of places you can find it. Most recently, Folio Society printed the complete short stories of Philip K. Dick. So it's available. And this one, actually, I didn't look into this, whether it was one of the public domain ones. A lot of his early short stories are public domain.
I'm not sure if it was. It wasn't clear to me. I had wondered that too when I was able to find that audio version on Spotify. But of course, some people do have access and can get permission for copyrighted material. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was accessible that way.
But 1953, back then, the reason a lot of stories from back then are public domain is because the magazines bought all the rights from the authors.
And when they went out.
And when a magazine like that, when it didn't last very long, when it went out of business, it went into public domain because there was nobody to renew the copyright.
Yep, absolutely. But and
it's also why a lot of authors rewrote their stuff when they went to book form.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have the rights to the original story.
So they tweaked it a little.
So they had to rewrite it to publish it as a book.
What a lovely workaround.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind, authors.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. I don't really have a ton else to say. Again, blown away by Philip K. Dick.
Yeah, it's a great story.
What a great short dick that we've had this evening. So. But yeah, like we said, a very accessible story. You can find it probably at your local library, or always inquire at a local indie bookstore and support local. Thanks for joining us, guys. Like and subscribe.
And our next Philip K. Dick story will be Tony and the Beatles, still December 1953.
We're never getting out of 1953.
We're stuck. We're
somehow
time
Philip K. Dick has warped time where everything he's written was in 1953. Yeah. The rest of it is going to be in January. We're never getting out of it.
Nope.
Well,
so come back and watch our review of that story.
Yes. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.